Live from the English Valley's History Center, June 28th, 2025, Jackie's podcast, and we're rolling.
Hello, my name is Jackie Garringer McDermott, and we're recording live from the English Valley's History Center in North English, Iowa. This diary was written by my great-great-aunt, Mary Elizabeth Claypool Wade, who was known as Libby Wade. She is 75 years old in June of 1950. Here is a picture of Aunt Lib Wade and Aunt Minnie Claypool. Aunt Minnie was married to Lib's brother Werner, and the two of them always celebrated their birthdays together. They were also the last surviving members of their generation. This picture came from an album of Minnie's granddaughter, Minnie Artist Claypool Weber, or Artie Weber, the mother of my listeners, the Weber family, originally from Kinross. We will talk and read about a few days in the diary, and then switch to happenings around the History Center and feature stories. June 1st, 1950. Belva's birthday, 1920. The weather is a little nicer, not quite so cold. It still is not warm, though, as we usually have at this time of year. I worked at cleaning the floors, rugs, etc. The first I have taken the rugs out to shake them. Was a little hard to do, but must be done. In the PM, Mary R. came, had been to town, and had taken out insurance on hospital care for herself. Minnie Zomer came over for a while. She has been quite busy with her house and had been changing the place. Took out grapes and berry bushes, etc. The other owner took so much pride in them, but that is always the way. One will spend all their time on something, and the next owner will discard it all. Belva Wade Yoss was Libby's oldest granddaughter, and she was 30 years old today. Mary R., or Mary Regseger, was a friend. It's right here in this picture. She was her neighbor, an egg lady, and a friend. Elmina, or Minnie Patterson Zilmer, was 60 years old and a widow and living with her 85-year-old father, George Patterson. And here's a picture of George Patterson. Minnie's daughter was Ada Evers and her granddaughter was Shirley Baines. I haven't found a picture yet of Minnie Zomer, but here is George Patterson, who lived out in the Green Valley area east of town, where Lib lived and taught school before she was married in 1900. Someone moved into the Newberry house, or it looked like it anyway. I don't know who. Jenny came up and invited us down for supper. We went. The family was all there. Had a nice supper, chicken and noodles, etc., etc., and finished it with homemade ice cream and cake. A big ball game at the park, Victor and North English. The children went to the show. Some of Frida's folks came to their place. We got home at 10, and it rained hard at 12. Jenny and her husband, Wayne Wade, Libby's oldest son, live a block away on East Clark Street. Their 5 children are all grown and married with children, with the oldest being Belva at 30 years old. It's right there. And Belva and her husband, Don Yoss, have Mickey and Cindy. And Evelyn and Wayne Kurtz have Suzanne and Kathy. Bud and Frida have a little girl, Barbara. Stub and Melva have Barbara. And Hazel and Glenn Cobb have adopted Bobby Cobb. Frida and Bud live around the corner on Southeast Street, and Frida's family are from the Hedrick area. The high school baseball field is just a short distance away in the city park, and the movie theater where the children are headed is on the farthest south block at the end of Main Street on the east side. Libby lives with her 42-year-old unmarried son, Russell Wade, who was also known as Towler to everyone else. And so Libby and Russell attended the family dinner this evening. Ethel was here in the evening, brought her folks' family pictures for me to see. Good pictures. Ethel Lockridge McCarter was 32 years old in 1950. Her daughter Linda was 7 years old. Her husband Max McCarter was a truck driver, And when I knew him, he worked for Libby's oldest son, Wayne or Perky Raid. Ethel's parents were Otto and Effie Lockridge, and her sisters were Mae Westfall, the mother-in-law of my listener, Jerry Westfall, and Marjorie Johnson, who was a grade school teacher, and the wife of Wade Johnson, and Naomi Lockridge Morrison. June 2nd, 1950. Cloudy and dark in the morning. My eye is pretty sore again. I'm not doing much today. Russell called home and said he was going to CR, so I guess I'll just put in a day without work. Can't see well enough to sew or read. It cleared off about 10:30. I lit the fire for a while. It is so cold and damp. In the afternoon, Maud came. Was here for quite a while. Mary R. brought 24 eggs. She doesn't get as many now. I wrote a check for the milkman, $5.31. Lena came. We had a good visit after the others had gone. Bernie went back today. She took him to Marengo. Ed went with her. Armin will start home tomorrow. Roy's will was read yesterday. They all seemed satisfied. At least they did not say they were not. Russell was home for supper. They took David Evans's icebox home. Went up to Dick Cheney's, brought home some pictures that were taken on their trip. He stopped uptown and visited with Father Dugan a while. I was tired and went to bed to sleep. One of Lib's Main's jobs each day was fixing meals for the family. So if Russell was gone to Cedar Rapids for work, he will eat up there, thereby freeing Lib from her tasks for the day. Lib has home deliveries of milk from the Sunray Dairy, owned and operated by Art Carter. Lena Wallace Wade was the wife of second son Warren or Mike Wade. Her father, Roy Wallace, has just passed away, and her brothers have been in town from out of state for the funeral. Brother Bernie is returning to his home today, and Brother Armand will be leaving tomorrow. Russell has just returned from a fishing trip to Minnesota and has taken the icebox for keeping fish cold that he borrowed, taken it back, the icebox for keeping fish cold that he borrowed from Dave Evans. And here's a picture of Dave Evans. He was a local lawyer. Richard Cheney was also on the trip with him. Father Dugan is the Catholic priest who lives not far from them. This picture came from the Centennial book. June 3rd, 1950. The days slip away so fast. It is still cold. I lit the oil burner after I got the kitchen work done. Mildred R. came and brought me a chicken all ready to cook. I think she wants to keep even. Russell took them some fish, but she don't need to feel that way about it. Mildred Reese is Russell's longtime girlfriend. After dinner, Tracy came. Keith is very bad again today. More hemorrhaging. They took him to Sigourney Hospital and gave blood transfusions. I called Dr. Schulenthaler again, and he took my plate up to the office again this p.m. Maud came in. She took a book back to the library for me. Hattie was here a while, then went up to Dr. Schulenthaler's office. Maud brought us some nice lettuce. It is still cold. Have had a little fire all day. Have the door open part of the time. Maud came with some books. One is Abraham Lincoln of Pigeon Creek, a fiction. I began reading it. Amy and her baby were here. The baby, Virginia, looks quite a bit like Belva's Lucinda. Tracy Kelly Garringer Wallace was my paternal great-grandmother. Her grandson, right here, Keith Garringer, had something very wrong internally. I was wrong when I said Grandma Wallace lives in the little house on East Clark Street. She lived there later. In 1950, she lived at 223 East Washington Street. Maud Foster Claypool was Lib's friend and neighbor, and she is married to her nephew, Ray Claypool. Amy Claypool Hervey was her daughter, and her baby girl was Virginia Hervey from the class of 1967. Dr. A.C. Schollenthaler, dressed here in his centennial clothes, has been working on Libby's denture. Tracy rang up. Some of the folks came yesterday for necessary chores. Keith is very bad. They went right back. A big game tonight at the park, edited for today's standards. An African-American team and the Clowns. Play North English, I believe. Dr. Schollenthaler helped my teeth. He also put some dope on the ones I need filled. Shall do it again when needed. Russell took some clothes to the cleaners. Hattie got her new teeth today. Hattie Newberry Killian is Lib's neighbor who rents rooms in her house over on Boland Avenue. Sunday, June 4th, 1950. One of the nicest days we have had. Was too cold in the morning. Temperature 35 degrees at Red Oak. 41 degrees at Iowa City. About the same here, I suppose. Russell went to church. I read a while and then got dinner. Had fried chicken and mashed potatoes, etc. I washed dishes and Russell went to sleep. Wayne and Jenny came up. They heard that Keith died last night or early this morning. Seems so bad, but we can't understand those things. His wife and little girl and Bertha will be so lonely without him. Others too, but they were in the home. I wonder how they will manage. Keith Garringer had just turned 31 years old and left behind his wife Lois and daughter Phyllis. His father was Carl Garringer and his mother was Ada Welch Garringer. Ada had died at age 22 of tuberculosis after the birth of his younger brother Orville. Orville was raised by Grandma Wallace and her second husband Frank Wallace, and Keith was raised in the home of his grandfather Eugene Welch. His grandmother, Janetta or Nettie Ballard Welch, died in 1919, but his Aunt Bertha Welch was as a mother to Keith, as she was only a teenager herself when Keith came to live in the Welch home. Keith had farmed the Welch farm. Mrs. Bolts came in later. She was up to Millersburg for Memorial Day and came home today. Had visited friends in the west end of town today. Lizzie Geiger Bolts was Lib's elderly friend and neighbor. Wayne and Russell went uptown. Jenny stayed until Dawn and Belva went by, and then she went home. Mary Newhouse was in, had been uptown to the post office. Dawn, Yas, and Belva Yas, Jenny's oldest daughter, are now the parents of 2 children. Michael David, or Mick, Yas, age 3, and Lucinda Jane, or Cindy Yas, age 1. They have moved out in the country in Keokuk County. Mary Newhouse is one of her neighbors. June 5th, 1950, Election Day. I wonder if anyone knows how he should vote. The wind is still cold. Sun is shining and it will surely warm up. Russell was out to Keith and Bertha's last night a while. The funeral will be in town tomorrow p.m. Lib is calling the Welch farm Keith's and Bertha's. It was east on the gravel from where there is now a cement bridge across the English River north and east of North English. A visitation for Keith will be held at the family farm rather than at the funeral home as we do nowadays. I sent a letter to Anna this morning. Didn't get hers yet. Did get it at noon. Millie was here this a.m. Anna Wade Cray is Lib's daughter in Texas, who she corresponds with frequently. Millie Swope Knipfer is a friend and neighbor. Warren came and said Lena would come and take Stella and I out to Keith's and Bertha's. We went and stayed until they brought him out there. Several of the neighbors and friends were there. Also a sister-in-law and niece of Tracy's came from Missouri on the bus. Carl's son went and brought them out. They are a sad bunch. Carl is so broken up, and Bertha and Lois too. No great outcry, but they feel so badly, I know. As close friends/relatives of Tracy Garringer Wallace, Lib and Stella wanted to go to the Welch home until Keith Garringer's body was brought there from the Sigourney Hospital, where he had passed away. Keith's father, Carl Garringer, had married a second time to Esther Brown, and they had 5 more sons. Howard Brown, Vernon, Ralph, Bill and Jim Garringer, in addition to Orville and Keith, and a daughter, Betty Garringer Van D, who was 93 years old this week and the last survivor of this generation of Garringers. One of the sons met the bus in North English when Grandma Wallace's sister-in-law, Sarah Elizabeth or Betty Kelly, the widow of her brother Lyle Kelly, and Bertha Kelly Ackley, the daughter of her brother John Kelly, came up from Putnam County, Missouri. I saw Milo West. He has a pretty bad hand, but it is getting along very well. Grace Wilhite rode back with us. Milo West, a neighbor from Yankee Point, had hurt himself badly in a gasoline accident recently. Grace Ballard Wilhite, the daughter of Armella and Charlie Ballard, now lives in town at the corner of West Oak Street and Walnut Street with her husband, Harold Wilhite, and her grade school-age daughter, Sharon, right here, is my faithful listener, Sharon Hagan from Williamsburg. Four sisters stopped out here. One came to the door to inquire the way to Mrs. Cunningham's. They left their car out here. Mildred was in a while. Russell came home and got ready to go to Williamsburg with Mildred. Walter took me to City Hall to vote. Grandson Walter, or Bud Wade, is evidently over his illness enough to take his grandma Lib Wade to City Hall to vote. Hattie came over, and later Levon and Leona and Hattie went out to Keith and Bertha's. Russell also went after he came back from Williamsburg. Leona Morse Bursler and her husband Levon Bursler, shown here in their centennial clothes, went with his aunt Hattie Newberry out to Keith's visitation. Russell Wade also went out to the house again. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes to keep this History Center operating. This includes cataloging accessions, creating displays, coordinating and preparing for monthly programs, responding to requests for family and community histories, keeping up the social media, finances, cleaning, maintenance, and providing treats for programs. There is a whole lot more activity that supports the center operations, and it is largely contributed through the time and effort by the board of directors and volunteers. The History Center board is composed of Dave Jackson, president, Scott Romine, vice president, Bonnie Romine, secretary, Don Banning, treasurer, and Carolyn L. Wood, Shelley Gerard, Alan Ackerman, and Dan Best, directors. Please send donations to the English Valleys History Center, P.O. Box 70, North English, Iowa 52316. I wanted to share an interesting ad that I found in the North English Record. It is from Johnson's Ice Cream Store. And here is that picture of that location, which is just west of Lib's house. It's the locker and ice cream. You might remember that my great-grandma Wallace brought Lib ice cream one day. I was surprised at the variety of flavors of ice cream, all made in-house. For dipping onto cones and for making malts and shakes for 19 cents each, they had cherry nut, vanilla, chocolate, maple nut, and butterbrickle. And for packaged ice cream to sell, like in quarts that were advertised for 44 cents each, were all of those flavors, plus coconut pineapple, raspberry, strawberry, lemon, black walnut, chocolate chip, and butter pecan. And they also had Rochester root beer for 5 cents. You might remember that Noah Samuel Miller and his wife Rosa Schaff Miller, they were the parents of Lecil Miller, who wrote some stories about his youth on the farm south of town before 1920. I found this article from 1940 about their 50th anniversary. Mr. and Mrs. N.S. Miller will observe their 50th wedding anniversary on Monday, September 9th. A 6 o'clock potluck dinner will be held in the basement of the Christian church in their honor. Open house will be held in the afternoon before the dinner and again in the evening for friends and neighbors. Mr. Miller is a prominent landowner and retired businessman. His son Lecil manages the farm and son Louis the hardware store. Later, Lecil bought the hardware store. Mr. Miller was born in January 9th, 1869, about a quarter of a mile south of North English. He was the son of Mr. and Mrs. Noah Miller. All of his life has been spent in Keokuk and Iowa counties. Mrs. Miller, the former Rosa Schaff, was the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Phyllis Schaff, was born on January 2nd, 1872 on a farm near Wellman where she was raised. She married Mr. Miller in Marengo. They started housekeeping on a farm adjoining his parents' farm. They lived there for 29 years, at which time Mr. Miller became an extensive stock raiser. At one time, he owned over 425 acres. In 1919, they bought a home and moved to North English. About a year later, Miller purchased the hardware and farm implement store from Dick Watkins. Since moving to town, they have traveled several times in the West. They have 4 children living. Mrs. Esther Kirkpatrick, Lecil, Louis or Dutch, and Edith Carter, and 2 dead, which would be Nellie Hohenschel, who died at age 24, and Cecil Valentine Miller, Lecil's twin, who died at age 16. Esther was the grandmother of my friend Helen. Dutch was the grandfather of my friend Stephen Rose, and Lecil was the grandpa of Gary Miller of North English. It goes on to say that Noah Samuel was a member of the Oddfellows, Masons, Knights of Pythias, and Rosa was involved with the Christian Church, Eastern Star, Rebecca, Pythias Sisters, and Royal Neighbors. And here's the end of Lecil's stories about life on the farm in the early days. On Monday each week, 2 salesmen came to town, one selling groceries and the other selling dry goods, such as yard goods, thread, and clothing, and other items. They came from Cedar Rapids on the early passenger train, which would be around 8 o'clock in the morning. After they finished taking orders from the stores here, they would rent a team and buggy from the livery stable and drive to Millersburg to call on the stores there. They got back to North English in time to return to Cedar Rapids on the evening train. The goods would come in about Thursday and be ready for Saturday shoppers. Nearly everyone went to town on Saturday afternoon or evening to buy groceries and other things, enough to last until the next Saturday. The goods arrived here on the express train, not by truck, and would be hauled to each store by a team and wagon, which was called the dray team and wagon. Goods were taken to Millersburg from here in the same way. The Home Lumber Company had a fine team of black horses to haul all of their lumber and coal from the train up to their yard, and also to deliver it to the customer on the farm or in town. One thing that the boys and girls of today are missing is the grand sleigh rides in the wintertime. The sleigh was drawn by a fine pair of horses with sleigh bells on them and decorated with colored celluloid rings. The bells made a pleasing sound, almost like music. Large fur lap robes made of bear or deer skins that no wind could go through were used to cover our laps and legs. The robes were about 8 by 10 feet. With your best girl beside you wearing a fur stole around her neck and shoulders, a fur muff to put her hands in to keep them warm, and a stocking cap on her head, makes a person want to remember those good old days. When a man was using a wagon with iron tires on the wheels, he could tell by the temperature was below 0 by the screechy sound made by the tires when they came in contact with the frost or snow. This sound could be heard a mile away. My father always fed a lot of cattle and shipped them to Chicago when they were ready to be sold. When I was 11 years old, he took me on a trip with him on one of those trips. This was a new experience and a great treat for me. The train was made up of only stock cars. The conductor took me up in the cupola of the caboose. I sat up there and looked out the window. I sure thought I was someone important. I saw the giant stockyards in Chicago and the buyers riding their fine horses up the alleys to each cattle pen. The railroad ran pretty close to the farm where I lived as a boy. And here's a picture of that farm. When the train was about a quarter mile from town and the station, we sometimes saw the brakeman get out of the caboose, and while the train was still moving, walk on the top of each car toward the engine. By the time the train arrived in North English, he would be over the last car and to the engine. When the train left town, he would stand at the station and swing up to the caboose like a graceful dancer as it went by. Our featured person this week is R.G. Litzenberg. We are going to lay the groundwork for the story about George Hardy's murder in 1929 by first telling you about his nephew R.G. Litzenberg and the different family connections. His grandmother was Catherine Swinford Hardy, and his grandfather was Jacob Hardy, and they lived in the Green Valley area east of North English. The Hardy children were Lizzie Hardy, who was married to William Litzenberger. You might remember we had his key fob donated to the History Center a couple weeks ago. Elizabeth, or Lizzie, lived to be 89 years old and passed away in 1945. They had a brother, John Hardy, who moved to Kansas and raised a large family there, and a brother named George Hardy, who was single and murdered in 1929. And another brother, Peter Hardy, who was married to Emma Long, and they had 6 children. And here's a picture of Peter and Emma with their daughters, Lila Cobb and Jessie Carter, on their 50th anniversary in 1934. These pictures are from the collections of Louise Ballard Davis, the Carter family, and from Bonnie Netzer Romine. R.G. Litzenberg and his brother John Litzenberg were living with Lizzie at the time of her death in 1945, farming her farm, and their 3 sisters were deceased. R.G.'s full name was the initials R.G., as stated on his draft record. And now we have Carl Hogendorn to tell us the story of R.G. Litzenberg, as written in the North English record. It was sad news indeed to learn of the death of a very good and longtime friend, R.G. Litzenberg. R.G. was a walking history book on the early days of North English community, and more especially in the Green Valley area. R.G.'s dad established a blacksmith shop at Foote, east of North English, nearly a century ago. R.G. was born at Foote and attended the school up the hill from there, Hinkletown. Whenever I wanted information on the early days of Foote, Green Valley, or Hinkletown, I'd always go to R.G. He told me, for instance, that the Litzenberg home in Green Valley already had a telephone at the time the first telephone was installed at North English. The Litzenberg phone at that time, however, was on the Parnell line. R.G. was the nephew of George Hardy, victim of Iowa County's most sensational murder back in the late 1920s. The murder case dragged on for years. Many were accused, some trials were held, but no one was ever convicted. I talked with R.G. many times about this case. He was bitter indeed, and with good cause, over the way the murder investigation was handled by authorities at that time. R.G. always told me he thought he knew who murdered his uncle, but he kept this identity a secret from all ears. R.G. was a banker at Murdo, South Dakota, and his bank was the first to go busted in the United States before the Depression hit in 1929. R.G. said big loans to wheat farmers and cattle ranchers, loans the borrowers had no way of repaying, led to his bank's demise. And soon banks were closing all over the Midwest, were closing their doors. So the closing of the Murdo Bank eventually led to the establishment of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation early in the first term of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. While I was in the record office, I had many business transactions with R.G. when he was bookkeeper for the North English Sales Barn. It was a pleasure to deal with him. I had never seen a more thorough person in everything he did. I am going to miss R.G. Foote, Iowa completely died with R.G., for I'm sure he was the last living person who was born at Foote. And here's another picture of R.G. from a newspaper story that was done on him the year before he passed. My friend Dan Best from the History Center board remembers R.G. being a good customer at the Best Furniture store where Dan worked. R.G. was very deaf and wore hearing aids, so it was always a struggle to have him hear when people knocked on his door. I remember when he came into the cafe to eat, which was often, he cupped his hands to his ears so he could hear better. Correspondence. Pam Kavanaugh Shield said, more interesting facts of the North English community in which I grew up. Great place to have been raised, such fond memories. If life could be that simple today. Thanks, Jackie. Mark Claypool said, Jackie, this week was extra special for me with the visit from Shirley and Vince. Uncle Winston, and lunch with you and all mentioned. A nice family visit. I so appreciate what you do for the community. Also nice to see friends at the History Center this morning. Yes, I very much enjoyed visiting with our Claypool relatives too. Vera Dye said, I have a yardstick that has Sauter Chevrolet, 63 Chevrolets, new flair, new freedom from care. I use it at home all the time. I talked to Bonnie Romine, and she told me more about the class composites from the classes of 1937 and 1938, with pictures of Glenn Ertuni Reed and his wife, Pauline Jordan Reed. They were stored in the possession of our listener, Phyllis Reed Shoemaker. She had stored them under her bed. They will be a great addition to the History Center, and the proceeds from the sale of the Every Wanted Evie book from 1957 to 2025 will help fund the display case to show them. If you have not ordered your book yet, please go to the English Valley's graduates page to find the order form or bring your money to the History Center. The sales are all pre-ordered, but you can pick up your pre-ordered books on July 26th at the North English Celebration, or you can order a book for delivery that day. If you have any of these large composites, we would like you to consider donating them to the History Center. We have a list of all that are missing. And here's an example of what they look like. They're this big, and some of them are even bigger. And we really like this one. This one's got Russ Bucher in it and lots of our friends from around town here. The History Center board is also exploring the idea of reprinting Won't You Take Me to Hinkletown, Dave Jackson's book about the ghost town of Hinkletown that was east of North English many years ago. I think it's a great idea. We need something to sell to visitors, and we had 4 people asking for the book just last week. We also have copies of the North English 150 yearbook. Don't forget the EV Alumni Luncheon on Monday at 11:30 at the Main Street Pub and Grub. For reservations, please contact Alice Stramer or Linda Carter. Our sympathies this week to the family of Linda Frederickson of Webster. Her picture is right here. She was a member of the EV class of 1964. She was an RN and lived in Cedar Rapids. We are hosting another educational program that we think you might enjoy. Sandra Kessler, host, an accomplished researcher and author, will be discussing Iowa's one-room schools. She will be explaining the history of our highly praised system of 12,623 rural schools in Iowa from 1856 to 1966. Sandra will be speaking at the English Valley's History Center on Sunday, June 29th, which is tomorrow at 2 p.m. We are also interested in learning about historical English Valley's items that you might wish to donate to the History Center. Please contact Dave Jackson, Scott Romine, or any board member to donate. That's it. We'll see you next week.
And that's a wrap. Great job, Jackie.